Oh, GM. Someone unmuted, but but that's okay. We are so back for another week's episode of Office Hours with Schiller. We normally run this as a 1 to 2 hour live, unrecorded, anyone's welcome on stage space with Bernardo and myself, where we just take questions, offer feedback to anyone that's looking to grow or get help or better understand this space, whether they're artists, content creators, community members, casual enjoyers, or founders. And every once in a while, we are lucky to have our stage graced by some exceptionally knowledgeable and wonderful human beings. This week is absolutely one of those occasions. I'm super grateful and very excited to have Jen and War Daddy up on stage with us today. Two of the savviest, kindest, and smartest people I've met in crypto. We had the joy of doing a little collab at NFT NYC with Remint Reality, the incredible content powerhouse of a company that these two have founded together. And they recorded some amazing conversations at the Garden, which was really, really cool to see happen. I had been able to tell right out of the gates that these two were the real deal when it came to just next level content creators. It's one thing to see it on the timeline when you notice just people putting out fantastic content. It's another to see it in person when you notice how insanely attuned and I'm trying to think of nice words, but attentive to detail someone like Jen is when it comes to setting up a set, making sure all of the key lights are in place. Tape is on the floor, marking every corner of every item, and just every moment of the next 3 days are being planned right down to the minute. And yeah, it's no surprise that both of these brilliant Chads have become somewhat, main characters in this Blast and most recently Fantasy Top arc. It's really cool to see, just having watched, Remint Reality right out of the gates. I think when they first announced it, and just noticing them now getting a big surge of well-deserved attention. Um, so, with all of that said, GM, thank you for joining us today. I think to anyone that is interested in farming, staying in the loop as to opportunities on chain, I think this is going to be super, super valuable. Hoping that we can have a lot of insights for just easily actionable ways to get involved. I think a lot of our community is on the artist and creator and very culture focused enjoyer of Web3. And I think there's a really massive opportunity present now and kind of always to show up safely, do a little bit of farming, and to just be aware of what opportunities are out there. Um, with that said, if you haven't done so yet, please give the space a share or the pinned post up above. If you have any specific questions for either of these two, let us know in the comments, and just drop a GM, say what's up. And I'll remind you at the end of the space, but if you are not following Jen and War Daddy or their shared account, Remint Reality, you're absolutely missing out. And with all of that said, let's do a little mic check. Bernardo, are you with us, son?
GM, yeah, I'm here. I'm doing well. Super excited for this chat as always. I was a little thrown off at the music stopping, not gonna lie. I feel like I tend to really like that like minute of just beat drop that gives me a moment to just like take a deep breath. But yeah, doing super well. I you know you just said a lot about Jen and War Daddy and Remit Reality, so I won't repeat it. But I feel like this cycle has been really cool to see content creators be rewarded and having like the infrastructure in place. So I'm very excited to chat all about that today. And yeah, appreciate you being here co-hosting with me as always, Fungi. But let's pass it to you, Jen, as a little mic check and just to see how you're doing.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and
Oh yeah,
clear.
loud and clear.
Let's fucking go. I had to like reset my Wi-Fi. I was rugging on the last spaces that I was on, so stoked that it's all sorted for this one. Um, First and foremost, like thank you so much for all the flowers and the kind words. Like it is always like I know for both Dalton and I, because we talk about this all the time, but it's always just like so humbling to see the support across the timeline, both from like people that are already within our networks and new folks that are discovering us for the first time. Like it, I think like never in our wildest dreams like did we imagine our journey would take us here. All we knew is like we want to make some dope shit and put the alpha out there and like provide value, and to see how it's kind of started to come back to us, it, like has just been like speechless. Like fucking Dalton crushed it. He was taking time off to like, touch some grass and was on vacation and was still grinding out videos and content. You could like in between soccer games, like I've had more emotional breakdowns in the last 5 days than I think I've had in the last 10 years just because of how overwhelmed I've been with the amount of support. It's a crazy time, so thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I saw your post about being like over 30 hours into this tournament of just not sleeping, like 30 hours awake, thriving in your lane, Taylor Swift blaring on the speakers in your office, just fire content in post production. And I know it's probably been very similar for War Daddy. And yeah, super happy to give flowers where they're due. Absolutely always. You two just do such an incredible job. I honestly can't think of many other um, content creators that have such a high degree of signal to noise. That ratio at Remint Reality and just in the content you as individuals put out is incredible. And I, as like many of you, someone with very limited attention spans and limited time. Um, it's so appreciated. So yeah, stoked to dive into it all. And yeah, Dalton, GM, let's do a little mic check with you and see how you're doing today.
GM guys, how are you guys? I am just coming off the back of like 28 hours of travel. So I'm pretty tired this morning, but this is my third pod of the day, and I think we got one more in us. So it's been good, man. I'm happy to be back home in Mexico City. I'm happy to be chatting with you all. Thank you guys so much for just all that you do for the space, constantly highlighting Jen and I both and what we're trying to build over at Remit. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Let's fucking go. Well, if you don't mind, I think it might be nice for those in our community or those who are just joining the space now, who maybe haven't been just full degenning on Fantasy Top and noticing your rise to stardom there over the past week. Who the hell are you two? What were you up to before you got into crypto? And what have you been up to since? And maybe let's kick it off with Jen first, and feel free to be as brief or as nebulous as you like.
Yeah, I I am a diehard Taylor Swift fan. I mean, like that's like the only thing that kind of comes to mind. But no, I ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to tell stories and be a part of the storytelling process. I originally thought that would be in the form of talent, but then I very quickly realized in high school that I can't sing and I can't dance. And so um, kind of shifted gears and realized that like directing was really cool and like just capturing moments was really cool. So I kind of picked up a camera for the first time in high school and I just haven't really put it down since, and it's been kind of incredible. I actually dropped out of college to go start my career in virtual reality, and that's where I have spent, I guess, up to this point in my life, like that's where a lot of my production experience comes from. Working on both things from like the client side as well as agency side, which was incredibly rewarding. And then like, you know, fucking around and finding out on other brand shoots. So like that's like the whole like before web 3, and then like coming into web 3 I ended up actually putting on the marketing hat and worked at various platforms and protocols in a marketing role. And something just happened last year where I just realized I'm like, I'm not fully utilizing my skill set. Like I just felt like I wasn't fully leaning into like what I knew I could do, and I have like very aspirational goals for myself and where I want to take my life, and I just realized I'm like I have to get in front of the camera. I've never really done that before. It's really uncomfortable, but you know, I have so much equipment laying around and it just kind of felt like a really obvious thing that it was like, hey, you should just start to try to do this and see how well you can do it. So that's kind of how I've now ended up in this like weird content creator media kind of role in this space, but I think it's exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Absolutely love to hear it. Yeah, and no, really, really cool to hear a bit of your background. I think that kind of keen understanding and wealth of experience you have in just media in general was apparent like the moment I saw you setting up for your interviews in New York. Um, have been on the set of Deez's We Do a Little Pod and a number of other um, podcast setups as well. And Weesh does an amazing job. They have a more casual vibe, I would say. I felt like I was like on a high budget film set when you were there. It was intimidating, but ultimately very impressive. And so I'm really, really happy for you. Just, yeah, human to human to know that you've found your lane, and I think we're all benefiting for it. So, yeah, really love to hear that.
Thank you. And shout out to War Daddy, his partner Ale, my partner Hannah, because it was like I don't think people realize that for the Remit IRL series, it was 5 people on set that put that together. It was both of our partners came out to New York to support us because they knew what a big deal this was for us to be doing our first like IRL production in Web 3. And then I was able through my network to source like a first camera assistant locally, and that was it. And like typically a shoot like that will have a crew of at least like 10 people. And the fact that we were just able to do it among ourselves on like such a tight, small budget was pretty insane. And also, War Daddy, thank you for, you know, not losing the stuff that I had you take as carry-ons or to take to check in, because I posted a photo and everyone was like, "Are you moving?" And I'm like, "Nah, just gonna go like film a thing for a couple of days and come back." It was a lot of gear to take with us, but very grateful for your partnership, dude.
Yeah, you two are just a power duo, and shout out to your partners as well. It was cool to see all of you putting that together. And yeah, let's maybe pass it over to you, Word Daddy. Would love to hear just a bit of an overview of your background. I know you've had a very interesting life and have done some great things in the space so far. So, yeah, as much as you want to share, feel free to dive in.
Dope. Yeah, so high level overview. My background was in like hospitality and sports. Like I had played college baseball, and then I had played professional soccer. So I got to travel around doing all of that stuff. And then 2017, I tore my ACL, and obviously ACL layups are not fun. As I was going through that, I had a friend of mine buy Ethereum for the first time, and they were trying to kind of show me on all of that stuff, and I basically just went down the rabbit hole. And while I was recovering, I will never forget this. I turned like $500, completely beginner's luck, $500 into like $80,000, which I ended up losing all of it in the Cryptopia hack. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, dude, what the fuck is this? And I'm never going to be able to leave this ever again. So it was just like one of those things where kind of preparation met opportunity. And I was like, you know what, this is going to be like something that I really get dialed in on. I didn't start working in it professionally until I started working for Proof back in 2022, 2021. And yeah, basically I just kind of went down the rabbit hole, right? Like I don't have a background in traditional finance. I don't have a background in like technology or anything like that. But the one skill set that I did have, and I was really interested in kind of using in this space to make this space better, in whatever capacity I could, was doing research. And I think back in 2021, 2022, there wasn't a lot of long form research that was accessible to retail traders. There wasn't a lot of like even threads on Twitter was like one of the big things I used to do. And that was like a really easy access point for people. I could go into like really difficult and hard to understand platforms, mechanics, whatever the case was, and try to make it easy to understand. And yeah, I got laid off from Proof in October of 2023. And one of my first calls was actually with Jen. So Jen and I both worked. I was close to the NFT finance kind of ecosystem. Jen was working in the NFT finance ecosystem. And we had interacted with each other a little bit on Twitter, but we had never taken a phone call or anything like that. And 3 days after getting laid off, we had a phone call, and like 5 minutes into the call, we're like, so are we starting a podcast? And I think our first podcast was like 10 days later, and now we've just scaled that from the beginning of November to now to what you guys see here, which is just a fucking incredible journey. And then, yeah, like we kind of made our pivot to Blast, like 2.5 months ago. We just saw the kind of writing on the wall with the Big Bang competition, a lot of people fading Pac-Man, very, very, very little information going around on the Twitter sphere. And we just kind of doubled down on our conviction there. And now you guys see what has transpired. So it's been pretty cool.
You absolutely love to hear. Yeah, it's always cool to, both better understand how people got here, as well as I think one of the most exciting and I don't know, just cool things to hear is how people ended up linking up. And it's so cool that you two managed to start what you started and work on Remint Reality together.
I'm not gonna lie, it was like a lightning in the bottle moment. Like, I think both Dalton and I were kind of just like feeling like really shitty because we had, you know, been in this space for a while. We had survived all the Black Swan events, and it was like, how the fuck are we still getting rugged? And I think that was the big thing that we were both just like, fuck it, let's bet on ourselves. Like, we know we've been here, we've paid our dues, we've done the research, and we're still learning and we're still figuring things out. But like, it it was just literally lightning in a bottle moment, and I'm so grateful because for me, especially with my individual content that I've been putting out, like everything that we put out is like under the Remit umbrella, but like I wouldn't have been able to do that, and I don't think I would have been able to find that in myself had I not met Dalton, because Dalton was the one who like came to me and was like, dude, you're fucking smart. Like you bring value, you provide value, and like to hear that and to have that reinforced by someone every single day has been so pivotal for me, especially in all the times that I wavered in my confidence in myself. I'm a little sleep deprived, so I might be like a little bit more emotional than I usually am on spaces.
I love it. I love it.
Had to. Sorry. No, that was super heartwarming, genuinely. And how well, just to confirm, like how well did you two know each other before this fateful call?
We didn't. I think
We I
we
think we
shared
like I
like
think I
3
tweeted
text
at you
messages.
once.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, it was
That's
one of those moments.
That's amazing. Yeah, it reminds me of like us starting SHILLR, where it's literally just Rugema tweeting like, "Hey, does anyone want to start a consulting business in Web3?" And just like a handful of people were like, "Yeah, let's go." I don't think any of us knew each other, but luckily got along well. And I think it's just a good illustration of how close you are always to finding someone that would love to build something with you, who's really well suited for like a partnership of some kind. And yeah, just love that lore. So thanks so much for tapping into it. And I think like it'd probably be a good time to cover some of the content verticals that you guys have really focused on. So maybe just like a little overview of a let's just what was the goal of Remint Reality? Also curious about the name. Um, and either of you can hop in on that. And how did you get started there?
I'm gonna pass this one off to Jen.
I, so a little bit more lore. My partner, who I've been with for 6 years, who was out in New York with us, thought our podcast was called the Jen and Dalton Show. Like straight up saw the Pac-Man episode go live from Remint's account, and she was like, "Who the fuck is Remint Reality?" Like, and I just looked at her and I was like, are you serious right now?" Um, yeah, I mean, I think the thing that Dalton and I both connected over was like just this common theme of like taking really complex topics and breaking it down in a way that is hopefully understandable to people adjacent to the space as well as folks that, you know, are in the space but maybe not like super deep in the trenches because they don't know where to go. And I think at the end of the day, the thing that we're both really bullish on is like the technology that's being built in Web3 is going to completely change the world. Like, not only the financial world, obviously, money moves the world. It's going to change the way we transact, it's going to change the way we interact with each other. And so, there's this it's funny, like we got on a call and we're like, should we do our first show tomorrow? And I was like, no, dude, we need like a logo, we need some branding, like let me cook, give me a second. And I came up with the name Remint Reality because it's like there's the whole play on word of like mint. We mint tokens, we mint NFTs. And I was just thinking, like, can we remint our reality with a better understanding of this technology that's coming? So, like, that's kind of where the name came from. And it's funny. So we started with the live shows, and then doing our first IRL production kind of just opened up a new series for us. So it's like we have Remint Live and now we have Remint IRL, and then it's like learning in public. Dalton, we need to come up with like a series name for your videos. Like we'll cook on that after this call. But it's kind of like that's how we've been grouping it. And obviously we cover a lot of ecosystems. Our full attention is on Blast right now, but that's I think a little bit more of the high level on the creative and branding there.
It's so cool to hear just like a little bit more about the lore, especially on the name Remit Reality. And so, yeah, really appreciate you speaking to that, Jen. And one thing that really sticks out to me about what you guys put out is it seems like there's something for everyone. You were mentioning like if you're not super deep in the trenches, but somewhat like in the weeds or adjacent to the space, like you could find value in the content you're putting out. Like obviously, you're going deep into Blast, but you also have videos on like TradFi versus DeFi, real world assets, and things like that. And I'm curious how you guys land on like what to dive into and the approach that you take for striking that balance between I think someone in the space will find this interesting versus I think someone who has no idea what's going on here might find it valuable.
Dalton, you crushed this one. All you, bud.
So I guess one of the first things that I want to just touch on real quick is like I was in the space, like very, very deep in the space as a trader for like 4 years before I ever worked in this professionally, right? And one of like the first experiences I ever had at Proof actually was an IRL meetup with a couple of the holders. And mind you, this is like early 2022. And these guys are sitting at the dinner table with me and they're like, oh my God, you're War Daddy Capital. And like, they're like sitting there having this conversation with people in real life. And it was just one of those things. They're like, I spent the last 2 years flipping fucking JPEGs on the internet. And I've never talked to a person in real life about any of this ever. And it's like that loneliness, I think, is something that is like, it's something that we can all relate to. And then we end up inevitably like dragging our partners into this, and we're like, "Babe, I just fucking flipped this JPEG for 50K," and then this, and I'm like, "Dude, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, why are you buying a fucking fantasy card for 15K right now? Like, what's going on?" And I'm like, "Babe, you don't get it. They bought it me, and if they bought it, and like, it's just, it sounds so crazy outside of our ecosystem." And so I think one of the big things for me is kind of democratizing some of the information and some of the conversations that we're privy to. And that was just something that I'm really kind of, we do this all day, every day. Like, this is like, I wake up and I check my computer and I'm like balls deep in all of the Twitter action and all of this shit that we like are thinking about. And we know that something's going to happen in a week and then we could speculate on it. And just like, there's just so much stuff that's going on at all times. And I feel like democratizing some of those conversations is really, really important in a way that like people feel like they're not just a retail investor that's going to get rugged. And I think that this is where reputation and credibility come in, right? Like, I want people to see me and look me in the face, like whenever we are at NFT NYC or whatever convention we go to, and know that they're getting an authentic representation of somebody that does care about them. And I'm not going to be making money on these people. Like, obviously, this space is PvP, but I want to be honest and I want to be authentic with the information and the videos that we put out. And that is something that Jen and I were very aligned with from day one. So yeah, I think Jen does a really, really, really good job at taking like a very high level overview of ecosystems. Like, she's done it before time and time again, and like these videos get so much virality. And I definitely think out of the two of us, I like going like super deep into the weeds on things, and I get like hyper obsessed with something. And I've been obsessed with fantasy top for like 3 months now. And I was playing it on on testnet and stuff. So like when I get hyper fixated on something, that you know that there's going to be a shit ton of content on that one thing coming out. So it's definitely fun to create content with Jen. Like, I think we both have different styles, but we both want to approach the user base or the people that are watching it, and really let them know that they're getting an authentic representation of what's going on in the space.
Thanks so much for the answer. Yeah, I feel like that really comes across as I don't know. I feel like I'm like pretty comfortably along the left side of the curve when it comes to understanding and being savvy with DeFi and farming and a lot of the things that you two talk about and cover with your content. And I've always felt the videos you've put out and the threads you've put together to be super accessible. So, as a case study of one, yeah, just bullish on that. I guess like message fit that you've crafted. And so let's maybe dive, because this space series is typically on the educational front. And I feel like there's a lot that selfishly I could learn from you two right now, and probably a lot of our audience members, especially those who are seeing just the rise of all of these incentive programs, farming protocols, and just things that are happening, whether they're on Blast or Base or elsewhere, who are probably like, man, I would love a little exposure there. I would love to know what I could be doing with a relatively modest amount of capital to safely get exposure to a few things without, spending every waking minute fumbling around and trying to figure it out, or end up getting, I guess, like over leveraged or spread too thin across a ton of things. I'd love to maybe just like take a very high level question of what the fuck is farming? when people see this word all over the timeline, if they're not familiar with rewards or points or, gold farming, what does this concept mean in your kind of best shortest terms?
I think it just means like curiosity gets rewarded. Um, I think it's one of those things that like all farming really is, and I do have to say, like after Blur launched, obviously incentives became an absolute meta on their own, and all of a sudden everything's incentivized. But I think like the idea with farming is you can do it when it's on testnet, you can do it when it's on mainnet, but it's like you get rewarded based off of your contributions to the ecosystem. And in this case, it's like you get rewarded for playing around with everything you possibly can on a platform. Like both War Daddy and I were on Fantasy Testnet, which was open. Well, it wasn't open, but like there you needed a code, but like we were both aggressively sharing our codes, and even if we didn't have a single dollar to put into fantasy on mainnet because of what we did on testnet, we were actually given like multiple free packs, which was crazy. And so I think it's one of those things where it's like if you're curious and you want to get rewarded and if you're willing to put in the time and the grind, like farming is a great vehicle to get exposure to different things and to like hopefully, knock on wood, grow your bag.
Yeah, I think perfectly covered. Yeah, it's kind of like this. I'm sure I have this drafted somewhere, but I feel like our generations were roasted for being awarded participation trophies as kids. And then we took that idea, invented airdrops and farming on chain and printed generational wealth for many, or at least like, you know, incomes that are sustainable. Like I think there's a lot of people who have made um, low five figures to break just around like six figures in a year from uh, just kind of hanging out and being moderately active. I feel like the connotations of farming are probably often a little confused, but it seems like in my experience as a very like lazy or uh unfocused, like I'm not allocating a bunch of my time to farming in general, probably not as much as I should, but often it feels like, it's like just putting your name on the test and getting like the first 5% for that. It really doesn't take a lot in my opinion. Like I put a post out about the comparisons of uh, pro or like social app payments or rewards from, like I've tweeted almost 100,000 times, which is probably something to talk to a therapist about over the past 3 years. But I've gotten $0 from that. Like I've definitely benefited indirectly from using this app. But in terms of direct rewards, zero. Uh, and then using Farcaster for 3 months, I've gotten like five airdrops that have paid me the equivalent of like a solid yearly salary in most parts of the world. And that was mostly just shit posting, like mostly just doing what I was already doing, maybe tipping people in comments in a spammy way for a while, or putting a top hat in my Farcaster name. But that's about it. And I feel like, I mean, in your opinion, what do people need to get active in the more DeFi focused farming protocols? And maybe we could talk about Blast as an example. So, would love to hear just an overview of what Blast is for those who are not super informed, what gold is, and how much time and capital you think people really need to have any decent chance of an upside.
I feel like Jen needs to take this one because she's done so many videos on this. So I'm just gonna kind of shut my mouth here and just let her do her thing.
Dude, I was gonna let you cook on it.
Fine,
Okay.
I'll take
Okay.
a quick little bit.
Yeah,
Basically,
do it.
to touch on farming and stuff like that. And I've been talking a lot about this and talking a lot about the kind of on the content front. We'll touch on fantasy here in a little bit, but I think that one of the big complaints is that it's a whales game, right? And like that's something that we've heard a lot about. And like I think that this is something that happens a lot within farming, right? We saw it with the Jito airdrop over on Solana, which was like an LCT or a LST, liquid staking token. And people put in like $70 and then they got rewarded with a $15,000 airdrop. Like if you wallet spread that, which like wallet spreading, whether it's good or bad for the space, like I'm not here to judge that, but like there's so many different ways that you can be ahead of the curve and make these theses that end up playing out for yourself. So like first things first, I would tell anybody that is interested in doing anything remotely close to farming, you need to make a thesis. Do not find your information on Twitter. Do not like if somebody puts out like here's a farming 101 thing, like you're probably pretty close to the top. And if that thing goes viral, then there's a lot of other people that are going to be doing the exact same thing. And so like it takes a larger bankroll if you're farming something that isn't or that is already all over the timeline. And we saw that play out with Parcel. We saw that play out with like basically any airdrop after Jito. The Solana airdrops are pretty much farmed out. Pyth was another one that did really well. But now we've seen here on Blast a lot of people fading that, right? And I guess I'll touch on another one that I've been farming and am still farming today is like the Milk Tia Celestia LST, which is like Jito over on Celestia. That's something that I'm still farming. And so, yeah, when it comes to Blast, I think what gets really interesting here is that we've seen Pac-Man deliver before. This is not going to come as a surprise to anybody when we see 7-figure, 8-figure airdrops coming at the upcoming Blast TGE. Like it's not going to surprise anybody to be like, holy shit, CBB made $28 million, right? Like that we've seen this playbook run before. And whereas before we were talking about an NFT marketplace on ETH, and ETH NFTs have been going down the drain for the last a while. We're not talking about an NFT marketplace anymore. We're talking about a whole fucking ecosystem. We're talking about an L2 that is massive. And like these TVLs that we're seeing are massive. These fully diluted valuations that people are throwing around are massive, right? Like if we're even just throwing 10% of the TGE out and say it launches at 15 billion fully diluted value, that's $1.5 million that is hitting the market. Like that is like literally money made out of nothing just because we know that there's value in an L2. And like to touch on Blast a little bit more, like Blast being an Ethereum L2 with native yield is going to attract a lot of this exploratory capital that we're seeing on ETH L2s right now. To this point, we haven't seen ETH L2s really grab hold of anything and really run with it. Yes, we've seen Base with like SocialFi stuff like Farcaster, some GameFi stuff, and like that's kind of taken its own thing. We've had some meme coins pop off over there, but Base is really it in terms of like ETH L2s. Like, yes, I'm very deep in the space, and like I've used Arbitrum, I've used Optimism before, but like even me being super deep in the space, how many people do I know that are actively farming things on Arbitrum, that are actively using Arbitrum? Like, not very many. That being said, if you look at Blast, how many people are freaking using this stuff? Like Fantasy attracted over 30,000 wallets within like no time. And this native yield is interesting. We're seeing ETH NFTs like denominated in ETH native yield. So like you're literally making money just by holding things over there. We're going to see ETH mainnet NFTs get transitioned over to Blast like the Blast L2. That's obviously going to happen at some point. You have all these different ways to kind of navigate and innovate and iterate on what we've already seen happen on ETH mainnet. And I guarantee you, Pac-Man's going to pull the same playbook of like a loyalty score on Blast, right? Like if you bridge over to Arbitrum, well, you're going to get docked. If you bridge over to Base, you're going to get docked. Like we know that this playbook is going to happen, and we still see people fading. So as you guys can tell, I'm pretty passionate about this, so I'll stop.
Yeah, Daddy's dialed in. And I'd love to, like, I really appreciate that run through, and maybe going to Jen next. Would love to just like define terms again, just for the audience members who are like what the fuck do you mean native yield? Like, what? I don't know what that means. What is yield, maybe, and what is native yield? I think like most people probably know what Blast is. It's an L2 on Ethereum with native yield. So we could maybe define the native yield part, as well as LST. I think there's a lot of people that aren't super familiar with liquid staking. So yeah, Jen, I'll pass it over to you, and also let you just tidy up any of those kind of terms being used.
Yeah, let's start before we dig into Blast. Let's start with like liquid staking and why this is such a big deal, especially on Ethereum. So, as you guys know, I think this was at some point last year. I don't know, time is weird in this space, but Ethereum moved over to proof of stake. So, in order to become a validator on Ethereum, you need 32 ETH. And, like, not, I mean, if you're like me, I say it all the time, like, if you have baby bags, you don't have 32 ETH. Like, you can't stake, you can't partake in any of the rewards. But with liquid staking, I could stake half an ETH. I could stake one ETH into a liquid staking protocol, and then like they have validators, and I just earn a part of the rewards that they're getting from staking. And then I all of a sudden have this token that theoretically should be liquid. Like Lido's wraps Lido's staked ETH is a great example of this. There are some protocols that will enable you to borrow and lend against your staked ETH. There are some protocols that will enable you to be able to transact with your staked ETH. So like that's kind of like the power of liquid staking, and we're seeing it play out across different ecosystems. Like Dalton earlier had mentioned that he's still farming Milk Tia. Milk Tia is a liquid staking token for Tia on the Cosmos ecosystem. So like that's what like super high level on liquid staking. Now turning over to Blast and this whole idea of native yield, basically it is an L2 that enables you to natively earn yield on your ETH and your USDB. That just means if you have a Blast wallet and you have ETH sitting in your Blast wallet, that ETH is earning right now it's like 3.3% just by being in your wallet because they are pulling that yield from Lido. Uh, there's like some I'm not hyper technical, but basically like when you bridge ETH over to Blast, their bridge like deposits it into Lido, and then you get like Blast ETH, which is natively earning yield. It's something to that effect. So like that covers where the yield comes from on ETH. The USDB yield is actually coming from MakerDAO. It's currently earning at 10%. So that just means if you have 1,000 USDB just sitting in your wallet on Blast, you're earning 10% on that USDB naturally. And so I kind of like to think of Blast as like, it almost feels like a high yield savings account that you can like degen with. um, which is pretty cool. And I think the thing that makes Blast super compelling, like Dalton said, like you have to form your own thesis. You kind of have to form your own conviction. And like obviously there are the things of like, why would you fade Pac-Man? We seen him make people generational wealth before. Like this team clearly knows how to execute, et cetera, et cetera. But like when I was first looking into Blast, I thought it was really interesting that they give all of their gas revenue back to the developers on the platform. I also thought like obviously the yield is interesting because like there's so many new metas that can be made out of that. Like one of the really big trends that we're seeing on Blast right now is refundable NFT mints, where you're depositing a certain amount of ETH to mint an NFT, and after a certain amount of time, like that ETH unlocks, and you could take that out. And I think so that was kind of like my main thesis was like this tech is enabling new experiences on chain. And I think if you watch the interview that Dalton and I did with Pac-Man, he mentioned as he was talking about the vision for Blast, he's like, obviously we want to be the highest yield environment in all of crypto. So that way, if you're on Blast, you're just by nature of being on Blast, you're going to make more money than you are anywhere else. And then on top of that, he really dug into how new metas can be made from this. And we're actually seeing that. Like, it's not only like, oh, new ways of interacting with NFTs, new ways of doing leverage on chain, etc. But like from a builder perspective, there's now new ways of generating revenue um, on every single other L2 outside of Blast. Developers get nothing of the gas revenue. Don't you think that's kind of interesting, considering that it's the products that they build that drives, I don't know, volume, transaction, and activity on the chain, yet the developers aren't rewarded for that? Whereas on Blast, they get all the gas that goes through their contract, they get back. So now all of a sudden you have businesses and builders that are here that are going to be able to tap into a whole new revenue stream. So that's on one hand. Now, I want to talk about the Blast incentives, which is there's two. There's Blast points and there's Blast gold. So Blast points is something that you earn based off of your TVL in the ecosystem. This is distributed every single block, and it's based off of your ETH balance and your USDB balance. So whether you are holding ETH or USDB in your wallet or you've deposited it into a protocol, you're still earning points. Um, as long as those protocols are sending the points back to you, which all of them should be. Like, that is the standard expectation on Blast, is that all points and gold go to the users. So that's the point side. Now, the thing that everyone's talking about is Blast Gold. And the thing that everyone is clearly most excited about is Blast Gold. And it is because Blast Gold is infinitely more valuable than points. Like, I think one bar of Blast Gold is the equivalent of like 36,000 points, just to give you guys like some comparison. And the way gold works is actually fairly interesting. So gold is actually used to incentivize developers on the platform. Like, gold is literally only going to the devs, and then it's up to the devs to figure out how to distribute that gold back to users. But the way Blast distributes gold to the different platforms and apps is actually all based off of traction and like your mainnet activity. And obviously different criteria for those building in different categories, and there's like some objective as well as subjective criteria, but like the whole idea here is they're trying to figure out like how can we numerically assign a number value to the contributions that an app has brought to the entire ecosystem. And so that in itself, I think, is compelling, because now you have an inflow of users who want points, who want to earn gold, who are willing to explore and fuck around and find out on these apps. And it's an opportunity for developers to get a ton of users. Like, Wasabi is a perfect example of this. On ETH mainnet, they were an NFT perps and options platform. They've pivoted and adjusted and updated their tech, and now on Blast, they are like a margin leverage trading platform. Wasabi, when they were on ETH mainnet, I think had at the highest point 1,000 users. Now that they're on Blast, I think Mason told me yesterday, I think it was like they have 50,000 users. It's either 30 or 50,000. But either way, when you go from 1,000 to 30,000, that's like a huge, like that is a huge jump for anyone who's building to finally have like that type of exposure on your platform. So like, all in all, I just think the incentive mechanisms, like we can talk about the pros and cons, but like to me, building on Blast and the incentives that they are giving their developers is unlike anything I've seen across any of the other L2 ecosystems. And on top of that, I think the user exposure that they get is just like, it's the same thing as when you raise money from VCs. It's just rocket fuel for whatever it is that you're building. That was a pretty long monologue. Hopefully, I hit all the points and I broke it down. But did that make sense, Fungi? Was anything confusing there?
Yeah, I mean, that made sense to me. Yeah, essentially, liquid staking opens up kind of unbounded potential in what you can do with that. You've shared some examples that have been, I mean, just like the native yield becomes possible, which is massive. And we saw just billions of dollars in ETH being not locked, but somewhat locked in the protocol itself. And then even with things like refundable mints. And I think we saw NFT Stats and some other folks do that. And I assume while they're doing that, the contract deployers are earning that yield. Right? Like that's the
Yeah,
incentive. So like instead of putting a mint out, having it at a set price, as many artists and collectibles teams are used to doing, everyone can mint, and then in a certain amount of time, they're able to reclaim their funds. But until they do, the contract deployer team behind that release is capturing the native yield on the total amount of funds transferred at mint.
exactly. I think stats collections, I remember he put a tweet out about this. I forgot to look, but for his, I think it was if everyone kept the ETH that they had put down for the NFT mint over the course of the year, I think he would earn like 16 ETH in yield or something to that effect. I don't know. But it was like a couple of ETH and like that's pretty massive. And all of a sudden like it takes a lot of pressure in my opinion off of creators to be like, "Oh, I have to keep delivering." Like it was literally a free mint, right? And I think there's something to be said here and to be explored more, for sure.
It is really cool hearing both you and Dalton just speak to Blast and kind of define things, but also just hear the passion come through. And a question that I feel like often comes up is like, am I early or am I late? And how can I identify that? Where should I be looking? There's like that idea of like skate to where the puck is going, but then there's also like consensus and what seems to kind of be the right move amongst the entire crypto Twitter. And so taking Blast as an example, looking at developers and what they're creating and how they're distributing Blast golds, and also forming your own thesis, where, and let's say someone with like limited time, limited funds to play with, like where would you recommend people finding new projects to check out, new things to dive into? What's kind of that strategy of just like exploring the Blast ecosystem?
All right, you guys are gonna make me rant again, but I think one of the things that I get kind of frustrated about, like when we just like when Jen and I first made the pivot over to Blast, and we're like, okay, we're gonna start covering this quite a bit. I had so many people reach out to me and be like, bro, don't got the time to check any of it out, so I don't know. And I'm just like, yo, okay, first things first, you gotta put in a little bit of effort. This isn't just like, oh, I'm gonna like put a little bit of money over and then that money's gonna 13x and then also Pac-Man's gonna deliver me generational wealth. Like I don't think that like I think that that's one of the things that we get kind of, I don't want to say entitled, but like we do expect to get like for very little effort, we expect to get rewarded. Now, I remember talking to NFT Stats about Fantasy Top during testnet. I was like, bro, this is so sick. I fucking love this. I think this is going to be badass. And he gets on there and he's like, bro, the UX on this is pretty tough. And I'm like, do you think I give a fuck about UX? Like, think about the ideas. Think about like the gamble file on this. Think about like people speculating and like, what if we do like 0.1 buy-ins and then like the people on the sidelines speculating and what if they get to place bets on the people and they're like, they're going to bet on this portfolio and like, there's so much shit going on, right? And I'm like, that to me like gets me hyped, right? And I'm like, why did we get in this space in the first place? Like, why are we here? We're here to fucking make money. Like, we're here to make money. We're here to make friends. We're here to like do all of that shit. But like, yo, we're in a tiny little niche of a niche. Like, you got to put in a little bit of work because you're surrounded by I don't know how many people are in this space. Let's say just 100,000 people, right? There's 100,000 people on Blast right now, and they're all trying to do the exact same thing: make money on Blast. Like you have to outwork people like that's the only way. You either A, have to outwork people, or B, have to have a lot more money than those people and then not give a fuck, right? Like those are your two options. So it's like if you have very little money right now very little, say less than $5,000, okay? They're like, I have an ETH and a half or lower, and I want to get involved in this. You have SocialFi platforms that were the second biggest and the third biggest receivers. How would I say that? Sorry, I'm like thinking, and it's fine. So they received the second and third most Blast Gold, right? So I would be checking out this. Oh wait, go ahead, Fungi. You got a question.
No, you're good.
Keep ripping.
Yeah.
So like you have the second and third highest receivers of this Blast Gold, and you could have been using this on testnet. You can use District 1 for free. You could be getting involved with this. You can hustle your balls off, and like that's that. You can buy like with Jackpot. Jackpot is huge. Like come up with a strategy for Jackpot. Like we know that tokens are going to be a big thing. I just received 20 Blast Gold for literally receiving big and just putting it into Jackpot. I didn't even know what big was. I just saw it in my wallet. I was like, fuck it, we ball. Like, put it in. Like, there's so many ways to do this. And, like, I just get really frustrated when people are like, ah, oh, fuck. Too late for this.
No, and I want to build off of that point, Dalton, because, like, the other thing, too, and not to shill our own shit, but to shill our own shit, like, this is the whole fucking reason why we made Remit. Like, if you every week we talked about this stuff. We talked about this shit so early. Like fantasy, we were talking about farming fantasy. I've mentioned fantasy in my overview videos multiple times. Uh and it's just like one of those things, and even like when fantasy came on, Dalton like put out multiple videos on strategies of like how to play the flash tournament, how to do whatever. And it's like I understood the game, and I'm like, I know this is something I'm going to do really well in. Like we literally like spoon feed the alpha. So like a little bit of effort is required. And like I came to Blast with little to no money. Like Dalton and I would be DMing, and we would be talking about opportunities, and I would literally just be like, fuck, I'm stuck. I don't have any capital to like do that insane type of like wallet spreading or farm. Like this was something that I really struggled with. I came over to Blast. I started like making some content that like covered Pac Moon, and all of a sudden season 2 Pac Moon, I literally got airdropped over like $200,000 out of thin air, or an airdrop that's worth $200,000 out of thin air. Like the opportunities are here if you take like an hour of your day once a week to watch a show, whether that's like mine and War Daddies, or if it's Modern Markets, or if it's Tyler Did It. There are so many incredible creators that put so much time and research that are actually in the trenches like we are, that are overlooked in this space every single day, that will literally spoon feed you the alpha. And like with regards to are we too early or are we too late? I think like we are in a cycle and a time where yes, you have to be decisive about the moves you make, and you should do your own research and you should form theses. But I think like if your blocker is, oh well, I feel like it's too late right now for a token that hasn't even launched yet. There is literally, if you go try to look up a blast token on CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap, you're not going to find one because it's not around. Like I don't know what else to tell you. Like obviously as we get closer to the blast TGE, there's going to be more people funneling in and bringing in capital, etc. That's fine. But then, like, what happens after that? Oh, we're all farming a token that's 1 day old. Is that too late? Like, to me, too late is after there's been at least 2 or 3 distributions, and now like the ecosystem is completely saturated, and like the farming opportunities aren't that great because maybe you're not getting enough money back for the amount of time and effort that you're putting in. But I think the idea is by the time that happens, you hopefully would have made a fucking bag, and also you would have found a few platforms that you just genuinely loved using, that you are like, wow, this is really fucking cool. This is awesome. Like, I'm going to become a power user of this. Like, there's a little bit here. And I think, like, Dalton and I are definitely cut from the same cloth of like, if we see something, we will do everything in our power to make it happen for ourselves. And I think like you have to have a little bit of that hunger in this space. If you are salty about like, oh fuck, well, I could have deposited to Jito and gotten like 10K for putting in like one soul, but you didn't. And it's like it's like when you get into that mindset, it's like take a step back and it's like ask yourself, how much work did I put in to doing the research? How much work did I put into looking for these opportunities for myself? Because the opportunities are out here. You just have to want to find them. And like, I'm going to just say it again. It's actually not that hard to find them because there are people like the Remint team, the Modern Markets team, the Daily Show from Tyler Did It, who are doing it for you guys. And it's just about showing up and listening and then going off and doing more research on your own, you know? Anyways, that's my rant.
Bang!
Whew,
Let's fucking
fired
go.
up.
Yeah, you two are cut from the same cloth. I think that cloth, the fabric is called different. It's definitely how you're built. But I like ultimately, I do think like I agree with so much, if not all of what you're saying. I loved both of your points on outworking, but something that I would probably not necessarily challenge, but reevaluate is what the definition of outworking is. Because I think a lot of people hear that and they're going to be like, oh, so that means I have to put 20 hours into studying this week. And I don't think that that's the case. Like, I think there's so many complacent people in this space who would rather spend weeks ruminating on missing something instead of 10 minutes to an hour tops, figuring out what it is and then punting an amount they were cool losing at, and or going to therapy for that matter. But it doesn't take much. Like after I saw your video on Jackpot, which I don't think I don't think you explicitly covered, but my understanding of the Blast Jackpot is essentially there's a million gold, or is it $1 million in gold? It's a million gold because there's no dollar amount, correct? Yeah, so a million gold, which is this token that does not yet exist. But there's definitely a lot of speculation. I think NFT Stats recently was quoted saying like I think something along the lines of like $10 per gold, which who fucking knows at this point, but he's smarter than I am, so I'm just gonna hold that in mind. And essentially there's a million gold getting allocated to different communities of tokens. So those could be NFTs, those could be meme coins on Blast, those could be LSTs from some of the DeFi protocols on Blast. And yeah, I recommend, and like, as you know, if we didn't already say it, we should say non-financial advice on any of this. But I would just say watch this video because I saw this post you put out, Jen, and was like, oh, that is so easy. I just need to go buy a tiny amount of a bunch of different tokens, and then connect them to my Jackpot account or like dashboard, and just like chill and pray, because over the course of X amount of time, a million gold will get awarded to people holding those tokens, whichever gets chosen. I think it's been
Yeah.
communicated that it's random, could be the same more than once, seems to be based on a few metrics that are outlined on the website. And you don't have to buy much. So, like, I literally just bought like $20 of like 5 different coins on Blast. And you can link wallets as well. So you don't have to have like your main wallets holding everything or interacting with every protocol. And I think there's like that's something that's the case with a lot of farming opportunities out there. Typically, if you're interacting with a novel protocol or a novel chain of any kind, usually best to not do it from a wallet that is holding the majority of your wealth or any significant amount of your on-chain wealth or keepsakes for that matter. But yeah, it really doesn't take a lot of time. So I think outworking could be as much as after this space putting 30 minutes into watching that video and then looking up, hey, what are some tokens that fit the bill for this jackpot award mechanic? And I'm just going to buy $10 of 8 of them. And I'm going to do the same for the points multiplier in Blast. I did that at the same time because I realized I just was missing a few of those boxes. And I want to maybe touch on, because I know there's a lot of creators, a lot of content creators that listen to our spaces. And I think PackMoon's a really interesting one. It's kind of social-fi in a way, but it's also a meme coin and it's also like a farm. So do you mind just like letting us know like, what the fuck is PackMoon? How did you crush so hard on it? And how can people still get some exposure, or maybe even just like think about getting exposure to things like this should any new ones come up?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Dalton. I got you. um, so PackMoon is, you can call it a meme coin, you can call it a community coin. I think the team is going to make the utility of the coin very clear very soon. They've been teasing around like a V2 with social validators for some time now. But basically, what they did was pretty interesting. They looked at all of the social fi farming, which I think probably the most well known one was Portal Coin. Do you guys remember that time where everyone was tweeting Portal, tagging Portal? And it was like all of these low quality, like spammy posts that like I just remember like CT was very much split. Half of the people were muting the words, the other half of the people were farming it. And you know, good for you. Get your bag. Like I'm here for all the wins. But there, because it had such a negative impact for a lot of people with just seeing low quality content on their timeline. I think what PackMoon did was really smart. So they basically did their own spin on social farming, which is instead of just like low effort tweets where you know you stick PackMoon in there along with 7 other accounts that are also doing like a social farming campaign, you had to create specific content covering PackMoon or about PackMoon or art about PackMoon and tag the PackMoon account. And then if the PackMoon main Twitter likes your tweet, that tweet becomes eligible to earn points. And you earn 1 point for every single impression that that tweet gets. And then PackMoon will also sometimes retweet your post. So that way your post is elevated to a much higher following. I think they had like 200,000 followers now. So it's like that is like the simplest explanation I can give of the mechanic. I think what is particularly interesting about this, I am rambling because I'm slowly losing my train of thought. Um, so, okay, we covered social dynamics, how you earn points up. I think the coolest thing about PackMoon for folks to take into consideration is like this experiment has rallied thousands and thousands of people to participate in user generated content. And if you come from the Web 2 space, like especially in e commerce or like any brand or company that needs content, like the type of content that's king is user generated content. And it's like, you can't force people to be making the incredible things that they're making. There are people like literally making PackMoon stickers and filming videos of themselves, like going out and sticking PackMoon stickers on things. And they post that, they get the post gets a like, and then they get an airdrop for it. Like that's pretty fucking cool. You know, there's so many different ways you can be creative with it. There's a lot of graphic designers that have come in and have like made art Beeple's made like I think like 3 different Pac Moon pieces. Like there's just so much fun that you can have with it, and it's all about just quality and curation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that. That definitely makes sense. And it's just a really cool idea. I think one thing that that team did super well, and I don't know if they did this at launch, but they essentially just have like a brand kit on their website. So you can pull any media you want, like videos, from that to, yeah, make your posts um, eligible essentially. And I think it's just a really like interesting mechanism. I think we're seeing like a lot of explorations with that. Recently claimed farther on base, which was granted to those who had the active badges. And then they have a boost mechanism for future airdrops where essentially all you have to do is evangelize Farcaster. It's like you have to include the word Farcaster, your Farcaster ID, and you get like an additional bonus, but not a required. It's not required to include like ticker farther. And shout out Alex Mack for reminding me to go claim that. And then you have Enjoy, which I think is interesting. I don't know if you guys have looked into that. Um, it's kind of like the opposite of a Blast coin, where Blast has like billions of locked liquidity, and Zora has like a few $100s or something. Like it's a stark it's like a stark difference. There's like significant liquidity on Zora, but very different setup, and that's essentially rewarding you for uh, what I might term as like pro social enjoyer culture on chain. So like minting art on Zora, collecting art on Zora, and how strong your like streaks are of those. So the more like I saw my weekly tipping allowance went from like 100K to 580K this week because I minted a bunch of shit on Zora or collected a bunch of shit on Zora. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't think yeah, I think that tipping allowance is probably only worth like $100 a week or something. But that's also after like a 50% haircut to the token. And since I bought more essentially, which is always a feels good man situation. But no, I I really do appreciate that response. And I do think there's a number of ways that people with limited time and uh, financial capacity can go and explore and get some exposure. Yeah, Bernardo, I'm not sure if you had any questions you wanted to tack on to that.
Yeah, no question to tack onto that, but yeah, definitely an agreement. Like I think these social tokens, Pac-Man's a great example, Enjoy Degen, the ones that you had mentioned. It is very exciting to see how people with limited funds but a lot of creativity and maybe a bit more time or just the willingness to outwork others, like Dalton, you were saying, can then grow their allowances and kind of become just like much larger than they currently are in terms of following or their bag size. And so yeah, it's all really cool things, and I feel like it's only going to get more interesting and exciting. And there's definitely a few examples of things that have kind of cemented themselves into being like a pretty fun and interesting play. I did want to take a second before we move on to just plug tomorrow's space. So every Thursday I host a space called Generated. It is mostly based on generative art and AI. And tomorrow I'm super excited to be chatting with Luca Pansato. They are a visual artist who started creating poetry and then figured out how they can combine code and AI to turn those into stunning visuals. So have pinned that post to the top of the space. anyone who's here would love to see show up tomorrow, or any shares or reminders set for that space, would greatly appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like that space has been a lot of fun just to explore the depths of AI and generative art, just as, today it was really fun just to explore social incentives and opportunities that are out there. So come through tomorrow. And yeah, thanks for letting me plug that, Fungi.
Yeah, no worries. I think like the next logical place to take this conversation. So we've, just as a recap, covered a little backstory, a little lore on Jen and Dalton, um, gone over Remint Reality, how it started, why it started, and what they've been up to since. Some basics on farming, and specifically why Blast is such an appealing arena to be dabbling in. A few examples of ways in which you can get exposure, if you are so inclined. NFA, with limited capital and time. Um, and then a couple of those specific examples of tokens and projects that you two are interested in, obviously have exposure to, but for good reason and your own sense of conviction. I'd love to hear, just like looking forward, where do you see all of this going, whether that's on Blast, the kind of like macro level of how on chain behavior is incentivized, how social fi kind of develops. Yeah, just anything in that kind of realm would be really curious to hear, because I imagine, just as people rigorously studying, quite literally, what is currently available and what's being built. Um, More Daddy, you had some great examples of some ways in which you could see Fantasy Top getting a lot more interesting, as you could, in more direct ways, I guess, speculate on players, have different kinds of tournaments, concurrent tournaments going on, and so much more. Would love to just hear from either of you. Maybe we could go to War Daddy first. Just some thoughts looking ahead. How do you see, this Blast next? Well, I guess like initial airdrop or TGE, going down, and just any other thoughts on what we've been talking about today.
Yeah. So I guess I would say that I guess I can only really talk to how I'm playing it, right? Like, I think that there is a lot of opportunity right now. There has been a lot of opportunity over the past couple months, and like we're going to continue to see that happen as like Blast gets closer to TGE and all of that stuff. So the TGE stands for Token Generation Event. So talking about like the Blast token that is expected to launch end of May, but could be wrong, could get pushed back. Bullish delays. But yeah, I think kind of how I'm playing it is right now it is the hottest casino. There's so many different ways that we could iterate on current projects that are gaining a lot of traction. And I'm definitely betting on those teams to kind of continue to have like mind share and stuff like that. Like I think this is an attention economy, and right now a lot of eyes are finally coming over to Blast, and like this is where a lot of people say, oh, are we at a local top? I'm like, dude, this is the first time in months that people are talking about Blast. So I don't think we're at a local top yet. At least that's how I'm playing it. And I think that we're going to continue to see some of these opportunities sprinkle themselves about over the coming months. But that said, like anybody that is like getting into it now, be vigilant and understand that like this is a cycle. These are cycles. And right now, something that I think is really interesting in the space is like how many different verticals we have that you can play in, right? Like back in 2017, it wasn't this way. You had Big Daddy Bitcoin, and then you had altcoins. Like you had like the epic alt season of 2017, and then that was that. Like that was your money making opportunity. And now we have numerous different verticals that you can pop off on. Like you have like the entire Cosmos ecosystem. You have the Solana, and then you have Solana NFTs, and then you have Bitcoin DeFi, and then Bitcoin L2s, and Bitcoin ordinals and runes. and now you have Blast and all the L2 shit. It's just like it's never ending. So like I definitely think this is the rotator cycle. But yeah, I would just say like go in with a thesis and understand that this is a money making opportunity. And if you want to become a community member of something that you're bullish on or something like that, like that's also a way to play it, right? Like if you're here for education, if you're here to learn how L2s work and why Blast could potentially be one of the biggest ETH L2s that we've ever seen, like I think that there's a lot of really cool opportunities like that, especially with native yield and different kind of incentives that they're playing out. But yeah, for me personally, I'm making money and I'm kind of shifting out of the ecosystem. I haven't really started pushing out of the ecosystem yet. But that will be the eventual goal there for me. So
Yeah, I'm a bit aligned with Dalton. I think for me personally, Blast just has really been like my playground for learning new DeFi concepts, and it's probably, quite frankly, as long as the chain is still alive, will be the main playground that I play in too. But I think ordinals, everything that's happening on Bitcoin, and I know like how runes went down wasn't exactly how everyone expected, but I do think that innovation is coming to like BTC DeFi, and so that is something that I'm going to be looking to get exposure to, um, after the initial Blast TGE. But on the topic of the Blast TGE, I do just want to point out, I think I'm expecting this to play out the exact same way we saw Blur farming play out. Like Blur farming season one, everyone got airdropped, and some people were like, "What is this? Like, huh? Like, oh, like whatever." And then once everyone saw the amount of money that was made, just a flood of people came in, and I think it is no, it's a speculation, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a Blast season two and probably a season three for airdrop farming. So keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, really, really appreciate that. I just can't, and like, I've done way less due diligence than either of you, but I can't imagine this TG happening and then there not being a new incentive mechanism to keep your gold locked up effectively. Like that just would be like incomprehensible. Like just given the track record of Pac-Man and just how all of the incentives and benefits of Blast. Personally, looking at it, like one thing I haven't seen a lot of yet is just art on Blast. I think we'll see more of it because why not, you know? But that's something I'm kind of curious to see if it does really take form. I think there was a lot of people like shitting on base, being like, I'm not putting art on the Fed chain that's just cheap or whatever the sentiment was. And then people did really fucking well, like putting their art on base. Everyone's like, yeah, fuck yeah, base. Like I'm all about base. I'm based in early open editions out now. And like collectors, speaking for myself, and I know a lot of others are like, dope, like I'd love to collect accessibly priced edition of a high edition count from you, and I don't really care where it is as long as the chain or layer feels resilient. And just kind of like a form of patronage, and as well as it being collecting. And so I kind of think it's like a matter of time until we see that, because it always goes from being like this cringe and maybe fears of like cheapening one's thing, art or collectibles, to then being normal. Um, and yeah, I'm just excited to see how this all plays out. I've been like putting very minimal amounts into different things on Blast, and um, really just like a lot of it is to fuck around and find out and better understand the space. just being, a co-founder of a marketing consulting company, like would be, it would be negligent for me not to be a degenerate wherever I can be. And I believe that to a large extent. It might be also justification, but yeah, it's a little bit of of research and necessary studying. Um, but yeah, and I'm just really excited to see you two keep growing, and really grateful for all the work that you do. I know that you do it because you love to, and it feels like a real calling that each of you has found. But I think we all benefit from it should we choose to follow and watch everything. I think what people are now noticing, and I saw you put a post out recently, Jen, was that it was something to paraphrase you like, I love that I can just quote clips I put out months ago. Um, uh, and they're now relevant and very helpful for people trying to understand this like emergent blast landscape. And the signs were all kind of there. Like there's been enough information accessible just from you two alone to make a significant impact in one's success in gaining exposure to and farming on blast. So yeah, just please for my sake and all of my friends' sakes, keep it up. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see just how it all plays out. I mean, it's a ton of liquidity is hanging out on blast. I think we're seeing trickle down effects to other parts of this ecosystem. And it's always, yeah, just interesting to wonder how that'll play out in the long tail. But I just want to thank you both so much for your time today. I feel like we've taken enough of it, and you should probably get some rest after this marathon tournament and back-to-back podcasts. But I'd love to maybe pass it to you both, and if there's any kind of closing words you wanted to leave us with, any other places people can be following you, supporting what you're doing on the content side of things, or just anything at all. Yeah, the mic is yours, whichever one wants to go first.
Um, uh, Give me 1 second. Dalton, you go first.
Okay. I was, yeah. No, thank you guys so much. Like, this has been really fun just to kind of riff on this stuff. Obviously, fantasy has been like taking up all of my mind share, and especially on the back of like a 30-hour travel day. I'm a tired boy. But I'm really excited to see kind of what happens. This has been like a really big week, and besides gaining 35,000 followers this week that were not good followers to have, it's just been really fun to kind of see like how much growth can happen when you kind of double down and triple down on something that you really believe in. So yeah, we'll be coming with more content. There's just so much going on. I know Jen and I are also going live again tonight. So the 5th podcast of the day for me. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I would love to do this whenever you guys have the time.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry, my mom texted me, sending me a photo of pho, asking me if I wanted some. So I'm starving. So I was just kind of like drooling and completely lost my train of thought. But
Thanks for the
guys,
invite.
so this is what happens when you live in Mexico City, man. You got to move over here. But thank you guys for having us on stage. This was so incredibly fun. We love the SHILLR family. You guys were one of the first organizations to take a bet on Dalton and I when we pitched you our idea for what we wanted to do in New York. And that wouldn't have been possible without you. We wouldn't have had the Pac-Man interview without the support that you guys gave us. And I think that was a huge catalyst for eyes starting to turn to us. And to build off on Dalton's point, I will just leave you with this one thing. Um, it's a quote. It's like if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. strategy sets the scene for the tale from the one and only Taylor Allison Swift. So just think about that as you start thinking what you want to do. You know what? The fact, I just have to say, I cannot tell you guys how much joy it has brought me to just be able to be a full-blown Swiftie on the timeline. Like, I've always had it in me, but I've kept it a little curved. But when the fantasy tournament came out, I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm going balls to the walls. So let me live my life, Dalton. I'm going to turn you into a Swiftie one day soon. Trust.
There's absolutely zero chance that happens, but boo.
I feel like you two have to go to like a concert together. Like that feels predetermined, honestly.
Yes, literally, that's part of what's at stake this cycle. I need to make it enough so I can go travel to Europe and like see her, and I'm gonna drag Dalton with me.
One day, you'll interview Taylor herself. I could see it. Yeah. Yeah. I won't tell you when I've made it, but there will be signs, and it's just you behind the desk interviewing Taylor Swift. Love to hear it. But yeah, sincerely, thank you so much. I feel like I've definitely taken a lot away from this chat. I hope others have too. Go follow both of these two immediately. This space does not have like, yeah, I don't want to say anything condemning, but two of the best people you could possibly be following in crypto, who really truly put their hearts into all of the content they put out. It is so high signal, never feels spammy, is really accessible even for the left curvers such as myself. And definitely follow them at Remint Reality too. If you are a War Daddy or Gen card holder on Fantasy Top and you are not fucking following Remint Reality, you are a fair weather fan and you need to go fix that right now. You should like lose some points allocation if you're not following them there as well. I'm just gonna say it now. But yeah, definitely go support them. Content creation is a very arduous, time intensive, labor intensive process. When you couple that with DeFi and crypto farming, it takes so much more time to present those ideas in an accessible and interesting way that you would want to listen to and be able to understand. Yeah, I just really can't say enough praise about these two. And would say like even those who, because often I see sentiment shared on the timeline of like, you know, I'm too busy or like why I'm too busy to do this, or I'm too focused on X to get exposure to all of this DeFi stuff that's going on. And then from a lot of those people, I hear like negative sentiment of like, it's bullshit that people aren't buying or collecting this stuff that I'm doing, and they're all on DeFi. And I would just say, like, if there's any chance that you could establish a comfier base for yourself by casual and on-chain degeneracy on protocols that seem safe and reputable, and of course you're using funds that you're okay yeeting into the eternal abyss should anything go awry. That's what I'm doing. And it always has worked out. Occasionally there's been some coin you're like, oh wow, that's now worth zero. And I just lost thousands of dollars. But on the grand scheme of things, you don't have to do much to massively enhance the amount of exposure, upside exposure you have to many, many things in this space. And one of the most important things to do that both of these two spoke on or alluded to throughout this chat is just being early, which means putting in a tiny bit more work than others when you notice an opportunity. Sometimes all that is liking a fucking tweet. Like I saw someone comment recently on how they got a Pac Moon airdrop just for liking and commenting on one of Pac Moon's first tweets. I put a post out earlier about getting pretty like solid airdrops just from using Farcaster. And I know I'm one of many over there, and there's so many others. Obviously, do your own research. NFA, we are talking heads on an expert app, and you should do whatever feels right with money you can afford to lose. But it always feels so short sighted and unfortunate when I see people dismissing the massive amount of financial incentives and opportunities out there, and then seeing those same people going on to kind of complain about missing out later on. And I've been that guy. I probably will be next week if I fade something that one of these two has talked about, or someone else like Sam or one of the others who's putting out really great content on opportunities. Like I have like in my Blast jackpot dashboard, I think I'm still missing like 4 slots of things like I could be getting exposure to. And I've just been lazy, and one of them's probably going to hit that I haven't bought and set to that, and like that's going to be my fault, and I'll complain about it on our Vibe Space later this week. But you know what I'm getting at. So I'll stop rambling and just thank you all for your time today. Thanks for supporting great content creators like Jen and WarDaddy. And tune in tomorrow for a banger episode of Generated, where we'll be going deep into the works and journey of Luca Ponsato. Really looking forward to that space. Bernardo crushes it on the hosting, and can't wait to see you then. But hope you all have a great rest of your day and take care.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Catch you later.